Hi, I'm Selene. And today I'm taking you somewhere the maps don't show. Most people think our national parks are sanctuaries, places where the only thing you have to fear is a wrong turn or a hungry bear. But for the people who actually wear the badge, the ones who live and breathe the wilderness, the fear is much more specific. The North Cascades are often called the American Alps. 500,000 acres of pristine, rugged beauty, spanning from the Canadian border down into the heart of Washington state. But to the rangers of the Marble Mount Station, there are certain valleys that don't follow the laws of physics. There are ridges where the GPS goes into a death loop, and there are trails that simply end. Silas Vane was the man they sent to those places. He was a 15-year veteran, a lead tracker, and a man who didn't believe in ghosts. He was the kind of man who could tell the difference between a black bear and a grizzly just by the way the brush moved a mile away. But on October 14th, Silas walked into the Granite Creek wilderness and became a ghost himself. He didn't just disappear. He left behind a puzzle so disturbing that the Park Service sealed the file for 75 years. Today, we're breaking that seal. This is the untold story of the ranger who knew too much. To understand how Silas vanished, you have to understand the man himself. Silas wasn't prone to panic or flights of fancy. He was known among his peers as Iron Silas. This was a man who once spent 3 nights in a sub-zero blizzard with a shattered ankle, waiting for a rescue he eventually performed on himself by crawling 2 miles to a fire lookout. He knew the Cascades better than he knew the hallways of his own home. But in the months before he vanished, Silas changed. His wife, Martha, noted that he began staring at the treeline for hours after his shift ended, sitting on their porch in total silence. He started carrying 2 radios, one official and one he'd modified in his basement to pick up low-frequency signals that shouldn't exist in the wild. He told Martha he was hearing the mountain talking, but not in the way poets describe. He said it sounded like a choir of people screaming underwater. In his private journal, which was recovered from his locker after the search was called off, Silas spoke of the static man. He described a figure in a vintage, wide-brimmed ranger hat, the kind worn in the early 1940s, that would appear 200 yards away in the dense brush. Whenever Silas looked through his binoculars to get a clear ID, the figure wouldn't just move, it would flicker. He described it like a bad television signal, a glitch in the visual field, before it would simply dissolve into the shadows of the hemlocks. Most chilling was his entry from October 1st. The trees are moving again. Not the branches. The trees. I counted 42 pines in the clearing yesterday. Today there are 41. One of them is following me. It waits until I sleep, then it inches closer. I can smell the ozone every time I wake up. October 14th was what hikers call a bluebird day. Clear, piercingly blue skies, a crisp 15 degrees Celsius and perfect visibility for miles. Silas told the station he was going to check the 4,000-foot marker near Granite Creek for reported magnetic anomalies that were messing with the local firewatch sensors. At 2 p.m. he checked in via radio. His voice was calm. He reported that the trail was clear, though he noted that the local wildlife seemed to have migrated out of the area prematurely. No birds, no squirrels, not even the sound of insects. At 3:30 p.m. the atmosphere changed. Dispatcher Sarah Miller, who had worked with Silas for a decade, reported that his voice suddenly sounded thin and distant, as if he were speaking from the bottom of a deep stone well. He reported that he had entered the quiet. In the world of high strangeness research, the quiet is a terrifying precursor to a disappearance. It's a localized vacuum where the wind stops, the temperature drops 10 degrees in seconds, and even the sound of your own breathing seems to echo back at you. Silas told Sarah, "I'm standing in a circle of dead earth. Everything inside the circle is gray, the grass, the dirt, even the rocks. Everything outside is green." Dispatch. I think I found where the static man comes from. He's standing right across the circle from me. And Sarah, he has my face. His final transmission came at 4:12 p.m. It wasn't a cry for help. It was a realization of someone who had finally seen behind the curtain of reality. He said, "Sarah, don't send the team. It's not a cave. It's a door. And I'm already halfway through. Tell Martha I finally found the tree I was looking for." The search and rescue team reached the 4,000-foot marker by 7 p.m. that evening. They expected to find a man who had slipped or perhaps encountered a predator. What they found instead suggested a total violation of every natural law. First, they found his radio. It was sitting perfectly upright on a cedar stump. It was still powered on, but it wasn't receiving any local frequencies. Instead, it was playing a crystal-clear broadcast from October 1944, a news report about the Allied movements in Europe. The station it was receiving had been off the air for over 80 years. Second, the footprints. In the soft, damp pine needle floor, Silas's tracks were deep and clear. They led directly toward a massive ancient cedar tree, and then they just stopped. There were no signs of a struggle. No scuffs in the dirt. No broken twigs. It was as if Silas Vane had simply been plucked straight up into the atmosphere at high velocity. Third, and perhaps most disturbing, was his sidearm. His Glock 17 was found 60 feet away in a patch of ferns. It hadn't been fired. Instead, it had been partially melted. The slide was fused to the frame as if it had been hit with an industrial torch, yet the ferns underneath it weren't even singed. There was no heat source in that forest capable of melting steel without starting a massive wildfire. The search continued for 14 days. They used thermal imaging, bloodhounds, and over 100 volunteers. The dogs, however, refused to enter the gray circle Silas had described. They would howl and snap at their handlers, their fur standing on end, sensing something the human eye couldn't perceive. 2 weeks after the search was officially suspended, a hiker found Silas's hat. It was snagged on a high branch in a ravine that had been searched and cleared 10 times over by professional climbers. Inside the sweatband, Silas had tucked a piece of waterproof paper. It wasn't a suicide note or a final goodbye. It was a technical warning. It read, "The mountain doesn't have a peak. It has a mouth. Once you see the static man, you're already being swallowed. The coordinates on the map are wrong. The forest is moving, shifting the landmarks to keep us inside. Tell Martha. I'm still here. I'm standing right next to her. I just can't get back to the right year." Silas Vane is still listed as missing, presumed dead. But some rangers at Marblemount say that on cold October nights, when the fog rolls in low over Granite Creek, their radios still pick up a low-frequency hum. And if they listen closely through the static, they hear the sound of a man's voice, whispering about a door that only opens for those who know too much. I'm Selene, and some stories are better left untold. If you've ever felt the quiet in the woods, I want to hear your story in the comments. Be safe out there. Until next time.